Ooh, we got 4 people on this evening, so again, I pushed the button way too early, but that is what it is, right? So it's been a busy day. Oh, I should probably bring up my chat so I can see who is on here. There we go. Oh, Corey's on here. Hello, and Pamela. Oh, hopefully I don't ruin your night, Pamela. I switched my spiel for the evening. Ooh, I keep bumping my desk. My computer upstairs, where a majority of my State Fair photos are, is being goofy. So I don't know why. It keeps logging me out of Lightroom saying I don't have a subscription, which I do, obviously, because I have it on other computers. Oh, well. Technology. So I'll deal with that one next week instead. So I don't know. Gotta love technology, right? I'm going to try to fix something here real quick. This is annoying me. There we are. My name was backwards. Not that that much matters, but it feels like the right thing to do. So hopefully everybody has had a good week. I'm going to change something here. I just got off a call with a photographer that I met on TikTok like a year ago. And we're talking about maybe doing a workshop together next fall up at Split Rock Lighthouse in Minnesota. And then Gooseberry Falls. So stay tuned to that, I guess. Hopefully by May we plan to have it all ready to go. So we'll get a few more minutes since I don't normally start till 8. Does anybody go out and take any pictures of anything lately? I tried to go out today to wake you up for like a couple hours before I went to school for the kid, and it decided to rain. So I would have weathered the rain, but there was lightning and thunder, so I went back to the truck. And then I got home and it all disappeared. So one of those things. So, right? That's how the world turns. Kind of a weird week, so it's throwing me off my game. I have to work tomorrow and I have Thursday off and not 2 days in a row. So, oh well. Let's see. Oh, I got 2 on YouTube and 2 on Facebook. Interesting. Usually everybody comes from Facebook. So anybody? Well, I guess. Who else is on here? So I got Pamela and Corey. Who else do I got here? Oh, my camera's being goofy. It's like focusing. Well, it's supposed to focus while I move, but not so subtly. Oh, well. Oh, we went to Disney last year. That was last year we went to Disney. I just reshared that post. Oh, hey, Rick, how are you? Oh, Corey's trying YouTube. That's cool. So, better than... I wondered why, Corey. You just said your name, Corey. It didn't... Oh, I guess if I would look at my... I didn't realize everybody's picture from like Facebook and YouTube is on next to your name, and it shows me where you're at. Oh, well. Learn something new. So, well, tonight I'm switching over from, I was going to do the State Fair, but I was having wonky issues with the computer upstairs, so I kind of got annoyed with it, and I gave up and decided to do other things that are more interesting. So, tonight I'm switching it up to the photographing without expectations. So, is what it is, right? So, we'll give it another minute or 2 here, and then we'll get rolling. But, one of those weeks, I guess, right? I should probably. I was down here editing photos, so that's all I've been doing today for something to do outside of making my food for the week. You know, we'll just get started because I have nothing else to talk about, right? Who wants to listen to me drone on about life? So tonight, I don't know how long this will take. It's kind of a, I won't say simple, but a very short topic, but photographing without expectations. So we'll get hopping in here, and feel free to pop up your questions as always. And if you want to support the show, don't feel like you have to, but it's up there somewhere by that QR code floating around. Let's see here. So photographing without expectations. So it kind of got me thinking recently as I was trying to come up with new stuff for the show, and I thought, well, what can I talk about? And it kind of dawned on me is I kind of find that the best photos for me happen when I have no expectations or I'm not planning anything. So I was like, that might be something interesting to talk about, because lately I felt like I was in this weird slump whatever, and wasn't really getting anything that I wanted. So I've just been kind of re-editing old photos. That's how I get out of the funk sometimes. And I just have been busy. It always seems like every time I want to go out and take a photo, something's up or we're going somewhere and I don't have time. So I thought, so I went out last week last week and did some photos on my days off. And then I got thinking as I was driving around, as I always do, it's like, what's different today that I got a couple of photos that I like, and compared to the times that I've recently been out and haven't gotten anything I like. So I started weighing it back and forth, and I come to figure out it's expectations for lots of things. So, as always, I'm going to start off with a quote. It can be a trap of the photographer to think that the best pictures, best pictures were the ones that were the hardest to get. And you've heard me say this before. Just because you climbed a mountain, 3 mountain ranges, and hiked through the desert and up over the hill to get a photo doesn't always mean it's the greatest photo because we worked really hard at it. And then we get it into Lightroom or Photoshop or whatever we edit in, and we sit there for another 5 or 10 hours and edit it. So I'm a firm believer, it doesn't, I feel like as I was thinking about this expectation thing, it's like we put expectations on situations in life and other things, and we come to find out that, oh, hey, Paul. Oh, hey, Diane. That when we expect something, that it's going to be like a trip, which I'll talk about here in a minute, or something that we think is going to go a certain way and it doesn't, then it kind of brings us down. Like it didn't meet our expectations, so the whole trip sucks, or we don't get any good photos when we're out because, I'm going to go out and say, I'm going to photograph and look for barns. That's too much expectations for me. Because once if I don't find any barns, then I feel that my trip is a waste of time, waste of miles on the truck, waste of gas, waste of money, because it didn't come out with anything. So when I don't set expectations, and the only expectation that I set is I'm going to go take photos, I don't really have any specific expectations to taking photos, right? I'm just going to go out and take photos. So as long as I go out and take a photo and I get something, hey, Don, something, I just have that expectation. I'm going to click the shutter and it happens, right? I met my expectations. Now, if I'm going out to photograph specific things and I get real specific sometimes in my brain that I'm looking for a certain photo and I've been chasing for a long time, I think today is the day to find it, and I don't meet those expectations, then I'm all bummed out. And again, it's a waste of gas, it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money. So I try not to set expectations. And we'll go into that more here momentarily. But I like that quote because I think expectations has led to also how hard we think we work. That sometimes I feel like, well, I'm not a real photographer. I don't have the skill set because I consistently get really good photos. I'm lucky, or I got lucky and I clicked the shutter and I captured it. And some of this is luck too, right? Outside of expectations. There we are. So first, as I was thinking through this whole thing, is expectation. Well, what is an expectation? Well, if you think about it, it's a strong belief that something will happen or be the case in the future. So it's pretty much we're putting things in our mind that I'm going to find, if we talk a little bit about reality versus what we see on the internet in the sense of locations we scout or things we find or other photographers' work, right? That subconsciously in my brain puts a thought in there that this is what that place looks like. Leading back, I've told this story a million times on here, I think, but when I was in Glacier National Park, the lady flew all the way from Germany, and Lake McDonald did not meet her expectations. So that got me thinking with this whole expectation thing is, well, why didn't it meet her expectations? Because she was looking at everything on the internet. She'd never been there in person. So she had the expectation that the water is super clear, which it is, but then she had the expectations that the rocks were super colorful and all these things, and it was almost like this perfect world. And like I said before, we're photographers, we lie. That's what I told her, right? Because we do lie. We saturate things and we bring contrast to things and we use a polarizer to see through the water and remove the glare and the reflections, right? So we are, whether we think we are or not, we're giving somebody else the expectation that this place is perfect and this is how it's photographed. Or if I'm researching and all I see is photos of it's always sunny and you always, or in the winter, you've got the perfect snow and the beautiful light, and it's not hazy at all, and all these things, right? And you see these photos over and over and over and over and over, and we're like, okay, what's going to happen here? So I'm going to go here for this trip because it's so perfect. And then you get there and it's hazy, and the snow is brown and dirty, and all this stuff, right? But you're like, all these photos I saw don't look like what I'm seeing, because that's our expectation. We thought that, hey, Trent, that we thought those expectations were going to be met off of what we saw on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook or a print hanging on a wall or whatever, right? You keep seeing these things over and over, so we subconsciously think that the expectation now set in our brain that this is what this location looks like. And then you get somewhere, right? So I looked at all the photos of, say, White Sands. And I had an expectation when I got to White Sands that obviously it's white, but all the photos I saw were like golden hour or things like that, right? They didn't really set me up for what I was thinking that it would be. But when I got there, I thought White Sands was much more magical and way better than any photo was showing. I thought there was a lot more to it. Now, if I go back to Glacier, there's so many expectations there that the only time you can get the best photos is driving through, going to the Sun Road through, from the east to the west part of Park or vice versa. Well, when I got there, it was still closed due to snowpack, and I could only go 17 miles on it. So now I have the expectation that I'm not going to get any good photos. The expectation has been set that that's the only way. The best part of Glacier National Park is that road. So now, right, I traveled 18 hours and it's a waste of my time. No, and I'll show you a photo or two here in a minute. But again, we're just getting that expectation that this is going to happen, or in the future when we go, it's going to be exactly the same, right? Because that's how we see it. And we know that the interwebs lie to us on a regular basis, but we forget that. So I kind of was like doing some digging, and there's this kind of thing of psychology of expectations. So that's where expecting something that's going to happen that will not make it happen, right? So there's also that as human beings, we have this natural tendency to pin our hopes that if our expectations are filled, then we're happy. So say I plan a day trip to, I don't know, the Iowa State Fair, and a week ago I looked and the weather's beautiful and it's not hot and it's perfect out. And then I get there and with the expectation that it's going to be perfect weather, and now it's raining. I could go away from that having the expectation was set that if it's not what I thought it was going to be, then again, it's a wasted trip, or I'm not happy to be there because I'm not getting what I'm getting for a photo, because I had all these expectations in my head that if it's this way or that way, I'll be able to take this photo or that photo. So that was kind of interesting as I was reading through some of these. I could have read all day on the expectations of psychology, or the psychology of expectations. But, and it is, there's just things that, and I do it a lot. Like, I'm notorious for this, where I expect something to happen that may not happen. Like, I'll hear a lot of photographers like, I had a person I knew who went on a trip because they thought they're going to get specific photos because the workshop is like wildlife photography, right? So they had the expectations of a wildlife photography workshop. They're going to go and get photos of wildlife. They did, but not the exact wildlife they were looking for, but all previous workshops that they had seen XYZ wildlife, right? So they could obviously not be happy because they feel like they spent money and wasted time because they were expecting something that probably may not happen. Not be like you're trying to look for some rarity in the world and it's highly unlikely you're going to see it. And there's people who try to photograph XYZ for 20 years and never seen it, but you think you're going to get the expectation you're going to go once and see it, right? So you get all these expectations that it's going to happen, but it doesn't. So then we pin the happiness of our life or trip or success of a photo based off that expectation. And we really don't, because not everything's going to go the way we want it to go. And that's where, as a photographer, you have to learn to shake and shimmy a little bit. And I did a photo shoot for a client one time with some food stuff, and you know, it would have been great where I had an expectation that I was going to be in a certain spot, and I kind of planned for it in my head, right? And I got it all set up and figured out in my head how we're going to do it. I got there, plans changed. We couldn't use that spot. So, right, I could be like, oh my God, we got to come back another day, but I'm not going to do that to that person, right? Because they're expecting me with my skill set to be able to figure something out. We made it happen. It's just a lot of the photos that I was wanting to do wasn't going to work, so I just had to be creative, right? So I was setting an expectation that could be met or not be met. So some of the things, if you're trying to figure out, well, do you have any expectations of something, as I was digging through this, is some of the common signs that you might be holding on to some type of, yes, Craig. Oh, hey, Craig. Yes, sometimes you need to pivot. And sometimes when you pivot, you have to pivot again and again and again and again and again. And that's how that works. So, yeah, good point, Craig. And some of the common signs that you're like holding on to these expectations is you're anticipating a certain outcome. I get this way where I expect something to happen, and it's going to happen. If I throw it out into the universe, it's going to happen because I said so, right? Or I hold out personally to a vision in my mind of how things will play out. That if I think from a aspect that if I do A plus B plus C, D will happen, and I do A, B, and C, and D doesn't happen, then I'm like, right? I'm like, so I'm holding out expectations of sometimes you have to pivot and keep going with things. But then it's also having a set idea of what you want or need from a situation. Like I feel if I go out and say, I'm going to photograph a barn, that I'm going to find the barn I've always been looking for, or a barn that's going to fit in my vision of this one specific photo I have. And then every time I go there, Pamela, expectations with children or even adults. Oh, yes, I can speak all day about that one, especially with my new job. Expectations, yes, you expect things to happen or go a certain way, and it just does not. But, those are just some ways I was digging around that you might be holding on to expectations. But I have no psychology degree, so I don't even think I've taken a psychology class. So what do I know, right? So some way to start managing your expectations, and I think in photography is when you get into that new situation, you got to ask yourself what you expect to happen, right? Like you can expect that this is probably going to happen, right? Or that's not going to happen. Or, I don't know if you're like a storm chaser photographer, right? And you're expecting a storm to happen and it's not going to because the weather isn't set up for that, right? I mean, things like that. Or, but you also have to ask yourself if your expectations should be this way and where did these expectations come from and are they realistic? I think that's very important because if I go to Glacier and I have set my expectations that the park is always sunny and it's always beautiful and it's always perfect and the water's clear and the rocks are beautifully colored, where I got to think, where are these expectations coming from? So if I think from that point, or most people would get the expectations of what Glacier is like, those expectations have come from Instagram and Facebook, photographer, people posting their photos, because they're not posting the day, they were there for 7 days. It could have rained 6 out of the 7, but they don't show you the 6 days prior or after that photo was taken because that's not what they want. That's their expectation of the park. But you also have to realize that if I think a park is always going to be sunny or your location is going to be perfect in a certain way or the light's going to look a certain way, you also have to think to yourself, are these realistic? Like, no, probably most of the time it's going to happen. But if it doesn't, what are you going to do about it? Are you just going to put the stuff in the bag, go back home, so on and so forth? Oh, hey, Chris. It's things like that. So it's one of those things when you feel disappointed, you try to think about whether it was realistic to expect what you were thinking for, right? So, and then you got to plan for getting what you want next time per se, right? I mean, like there's always tomorrow. Like I'll show you a couple of photos here in a minute. I'll also talk about expectations that I had and so on and so forth. But it's one of those things that if I'm on a 7-day trip and the first day is raining, does that mean the whole day it's going to rain? No. Sometimes we look at the forecast and say, okay, it's going to be rainy a 10% chance of rain. I could look at that and say the whole day is ruined. Well, it's only a 10% chance of rain. It's not really rain, right? Now, if it's like 90% chance of rain, I have to set the expectation in my head that it's realistically probably going to rain. So instead of whining about it and saying I'm done and take my happiness away, try to figure out, okay, with the situation given, what can I do to make the photograph? How do I incorporate the sour situation into something positive? And I'll show you a couple of photos here in a minute. But it's things like that. You just have to remember that when something happens, it's not all or nothing. You can kind of keep going, but you have to manage those expectations. So the easiest thing to say is no expectations equal no disappointments. So when I go out and take photos, I feel like the more specific I get, or the more specific I think a photo should be, the larger the disappointment. Because I'm expecting it to turn out a certain way, or I'm expecting it to do this, or, whatever it may be. So if I just go out and say, okay, I'm going to take photos today. If I don't go and take photos, then I didn't meet my expectations. Yeah, I'm kind of like, pissed off about it. That's why I've been lately. Like next Tuesday and Wednesday, I'm going to go take photos. And then something comes up and then I can't go do it. And then I start getting, okay, now I don't have photos for next year. And each day that passes, I'm not going to have a fall photo for our Iowa. And I'm not going to have, I'm scraping the bottom of the bucket this year already for photos for the calendar and things like that I'm not happy with. And I don't want to throw crap out, but I'll have something. I just got to keep looking. Things like that, right? So then I snowball. I'm that person where the next year's going to suck and then the following year can suck. But I just have to meet those expectations that, no, it's not. I always got to remind myself that right now that I might be in this weird slump of not really creating consistently photographs that I'm loving. If I go back and think about, okay, that's my expectation to this point, that that's not happening, and I look back at the past, I usually find out when I am at this level that what comes after this is awesome. It's actually kind of an amazing time for at least a year or so. So that's what I got to manage. That right now my expectation is not being met, but it probably will be here soon in the future. But no expectations equal no disappointments. But you always have to have, we're human beings. We're all going to have some type of expectation, whether it's photographically or relationship or whatever. So some of the things is, boy, I got junk in front of my stuff. Can I move that? No, I can't. Oh, well. Oh, that is not what I wanted to do. There we are. So some of the things that I think where we get expectations as photographers in photography is, I'm going to learn everything I will ever need all at once. That if you're new to this, that you buy the camera, and just because you bought the camera and as soon as you put it in your hands, something comes over you and all the knowledge of the world is sucked into your brain and it's right here and you know what to do. That's never going to happen, right? I'm that way. I like to know as much as I can because we set the expectation that the more we know, the better we are, which is true in certain things. The more you know about a skill set, the better you're going to be at it, right? But I was thinking that with my new job is how I'm going to learn all this crap, that there's just so much, and they're telling me it's going to be 6 months at minimum, if not a year, before you just everything kind of gels together. That's a long time. So I have to put the expectation that each day I learn something new, and if I retain it. 3 months ago, I thought I'm not going to be able to do this, and now I go in every day and I have no problems, but I still have my questions in the situations on how do I handle certain things. But I can't learn all this at once. Wouldn't it be great if we could learn everything at once? That would be awesome. But we have to set the expectation that we're not going to learn everything. And it takes time. And then we also have this expectation that every photograph will turn out as we envision it, right? That I envision it up here. I put it into the black box in the black tube, and the light comes in, and I click it. Hey, Peggy, that I click it, and then the perfect exposure that I thought was going to turn out, which then I put it into my editing device, and then poof, I exactly know how much saturation and vibrance and all this crap to add to it. And then I'm going to walk over to my Pro 100, and I'm going to only have to print one print. And it's this creative circle of easiness. There's always going to be a hiccup somewhere. Like all the black and whites I just posted. Those are all old photos. I just obviously didn't have a vision for at some point. Those were all, except maybe two, were probably going to be black and white. I just didn't know how to get there, and for some reason I recently got there, so it is what it is. We also have to remember that just because we set the expectation that amazing locations equal amazing photographs. Not really. Right? I mean, I could go to the most amazing spot in the world, and if I use too slow of a shutter speed, doesn't make it any better. Right? It's still not an awesome photo because it's not technically well executed, but it's just because it's an amazing place or amazing thing. Or sometimes people say, well, this is an amazing photograph, and technically it's not bad. Compositionally, it's not bad. Let's say use the world of photojournalism. And people will say, well, but this, why didn't it win an award, or why didn't it win this? Because it didn't tell the story. But then when somebody tells you the backstory on it, you're like, wow, that's pretty powerful. But we have to be able to take that story and put it into the picture for people to understand it, right? Just because we have an amazing story or an amazing location doesn't make it an amazing photograph. And then I also think that we put the expectations into the more work we put into the photograph, the better it is. So that example of I walked across 3 mountain ranges across 10 continents in the snow, ice, and 150-degree heat to get this photo and back. And then I worked on it for 100 days straight in Lightroom, makes it the most amazing photo because I put all this work into it. I find out that the ones that I put the most work into it are ones that I don't love the best. It doesn't work out for me. But the ones that are very simple, or ones that I'm 15, 20, 30 minutes, I don't know, whatever it may be, I find, work out the best for me. Let's talk a little bit about workshops. So I was just talking to Levi, who I had met on TikTok about a year ago. And we became friends on Facebook. And then he's like, Stacey, you've done some workshops. So we started talking about workshops. And he's like, would you be interested in teaching me how to do a workshop or two? And I was like, well, sure. And he's like, do you want to come up this fall? Which didn't happen, obviously, because we both got busy, new jobs, and he moved. But long story short, we're planning to do a workshop up at Split Rock, Gooseberry Falls, possibly next into September, beginning of October, up in Minnesota. So that will be kind of fun. Hopefully we get there and the world doesn't fall apart and all that crap, so we can do it. Kind of funness, because I think that'd be fun. He wants to learn it. I'm willing to teach him, and it'll just be fun to do that hands-on workshop kind of stuff. But people have expectations in a workshop that if they go, they're going to get amazing photos. They see amazing photos taken from that workshop previously, XYZ example of the wildlife one, right? Let's say you're going to go photograph bobcats, and it's literally called the Bobcat Workshop or something, and you know it's nature, right? Bobcats aren't going to show up and say, oh, Susie's out taking her workshop this week, and we're all going to go head out there so she gets good photos, right? No, it's Mother Nature. It's at its disposal, right? You're at the disposal of Mother Nature, rain, weather. We set ourselves up even for workshops that we will come back with amazing photos because we're going to do amazing photos, because we're at amazing locations and we have amazing subjects and all this stuff. But we have to remember that we show up to the workshop and it's cloudy. I was listening to a podcast recently where two guys had recently done, I think, one of their first 5 workshops, and they had to pivot and keep pivoting because every location, the weather wasn't light. They were there for the sunrise. Guess what? It was cloudy. It was a stinky sunrise. What do? They had other locations. Those didn't turn out. So it's just like Craig said, sometimes you need to pivot. That's how it works. You just keep pivoting and, and just have to be okay with that. You might go to a workshop or I do it where I will read a class. When I was at Photo Pro, we did I went to lots of trade shows a couple times a year, where camera stores would learn new stuff from other camera stores, and these big wigs of the world of retail would come up and talk all this crap, right? And I would get breakout sessions like 4 or 5 a day, and I'd spend time marking them out and get really excited, and like that's what I want to talk about. It's like how to increase your sales in your store. I love that. And I get there, and I had the expectation that I was going to learn new things on how to increase sales at the store. And I get there and my expectation was not met because I knew all that crap already. Add a filter to every sale, add an extra battery to every sale, add a screen protector to every sale. And I'm thinking, we all know that. So again, I had that expectation, right? So did I learn other things there? Yes, I did learn other things, not from the person doing the breakout session, but other people in the store. Like, well, we do bundles. Oh, I never thought of that. So it's stuff like that. So I had an expectation about a learning experience that didn't work out, but I have to find, even if you go to a workshop or you sit here and listen to me drone on every Tuesday night, you may not pick up everything you want, but you'll pick up one thing, and that's what matters. Chris says Split Rock has beautiful lighthouse and unique views. I was talking to Levi. He's like, have you been here? I'm like, nope. I'm relying on you, good sir. So, but we're going to go out and scout out stuff together maybe later this spring. So that'll be fun. So let's talk about images versus reality. This has kind of been a big thing if you're a TikTok follower of photographers and reels on Instagram, where you get these influencers who live in vans. And as photographers, they're always like, I can just get a camera and buy $100,000 van and get a deal with Think Tank per se, or Nikon or something, and this will be easy, and they pay me all this money and I get free gear, right? And no, it does not work that way. Or they go to the national park and they wake up and they have this TikTok and this reel of the sunset at Arches, and it comes up over and there's no one there, and then it jumps to 12,000 people literally seem to be there before sunrise, and that's not reality. So we start setting our expectations of that location based off of one or two people. Like, I don't know, just go out to go out to TikTok or Instagram if you haven't, and go to Reels on Instagram and just type in like a national park, and I guarantee you will see a million reels or videos that show the most pristine park, the perfect park, the color of the rocks beautiful, all this stuff, and then you get there and guess what? It's not like that. So find a park that you know you've been to and then go look it up online. I guarantee you it's probably nothing like you saw, because again, we're realizing that these influencers, they're editors, they're editing stuff, right? I mean, I work a little bit with Think Tank. I've done some stuff with a blog for them. I did some travel stuff in May and took some photos with the bags and stuff, but I didn't get to quit my job now, did I? No, I'm still doing my job and all this stuff. So it's not that reality versus the actual real life of that place, or that image is based off of other people, and guess what? They're liars. I mean, right, to be honest. So it's always a very interesting way to look at some of that stuff. Now I'm just going to kind of show you some photos if I remember. That's what's up next. And kind of photos. Oh no, so let's get through this first. So what's going to happen when we have expectations and things are not met? One, you can lose motivation, right? You plan this trip, you get there, it's very demotivating, right? When you get there and it's not what you expected, and then you get in this slump, and you're like, oh, this is dumb, this is a waste of time, a waste of money, a waste of everything. And we have to remember that, no, there's other days ahead or things coming, so on and so forth, that this is just a hiccup in the road, and remember, pivot. That happened to me the first day of Glacier. Exactly. I got there. It was rainy. It was shitty. I had to buy a raincoat. That's not what I wanted to do and spend $100 on a raincoat, because that's the closest place that had one. It was crappy. It was horrible. It was overcast. It was like heavy rain. And I thought, you know what? How can I turn this shitty, sour situation into something great? So I had to change my mindset of the photographs I was wanting to create, and now create photographs with the weather that was given. And to be honest, it was actually better than when it was sunny and nice, for the most part. Then we start to lack creativity, because we had this preconceived notion up here in our head that we were going to get these perfect blue sky photos with the white puffy clouds and so on and so forth, and then it's not happening. So then we just kind of like shut down, and we lose the creativity of, now we can't make a photo. Then we start self-doubting ourselves that, why am I doing this? Why do I buy camera gear? I probably said this to my wife a million times. I should just sell my shit and be done. I say that all the time. Why? Because things aren't going my way, you know. I'm happy that 10 people show up here on a regular basis every week. I'm very appreciative of the ones who come. Would I like to have 100? Sure. Is that happening? No. How do I get there? I don't know, right? It's things like that. So sometimes I feel like if I just put something out there that it should happen, and it doesn't. So I start to self-doubt if I'm doing what I'm doing. Am I good enough? Sure, so on and so forth. Happens with everything, right? But then I think the biggest one is we miss the greatest opportunities. So say Glacier. I had some awesome opportunities with the weather, and even the next few days after that, the opportunities were super cool. They were awesome. I think I've got a couple of the photos up here in a moment, but I could have lost opportunities because I was self-doubt. I was lacking creativity. I didn't want to do anything other than sit in the van and all day and be pity party, right? Because the weather sucked. I didn't meet my expectation. But when you turn around and then you stop self-doubting yourself and you don't lack your creativity and you get your motivation and you start finding opportunities, and sometimes that then forces us to use our creative brain to think differently, which is a skill all in itself that can always be cultured and redone and revamped and get better at. Because if you do start doing things for a little bit of cash like some people do, the more you can pivot and the more you can take the crappy opportunity and find the good opportunity. That's what you need to do, because things are not always going to happen the way we want them to. So now this photo, look at that. That's a shitty photo. You can barely see anything, right? That was Glacier the first day. So that's what I saw a majority of when I got there. It was overcast, if that's to say the least. You could barely see anything. I was like, what do I do? So how do I create these kind of photographs, and what's going to come about it? I could just say, yep, I took this photograph. It sucks. It's not great, right? What can I do? Is it an editing thing later? But how can I take this situation and put it and make it better, right? So as I get through things and sometimes it's not, do you think you're self-doubting yourself? I do it like I can't take the situation and make it any better. And then I have to think, you can do it. How do I do it? And that's when, like I've said before, when we were talking about creating a photographic process, I have to think, okay, I want this to happen. Or if I look at this and say, okay, maybe I photographed that ridge line with the trees, right? I don't have any sky really. It's gone. It's all rain and clouds, right? Well, the opportunity is there to wait for a break in the clouds. Maybe I'll get good light or something very different or dramatic, or I'll be able to, the clouds will break up around that ridge line. I just have to be patient. And then I have to think through that process. When that time occurs, what do I need to do, right? So, which then leads over to like a photo like this. This wasn't the same area, but I went back a couple days later past this area and it wasn't as dramatic, right? Sometimes the best photos can be made in the crappiest weather. I've said that before. So you can get photos like this. I just have to patiently wait, because in this situation, I take one photo and I'm like, oh, I don't like the composition. I tweak it slightly. And then guess what? The clouds have drifted over the peak again on the right side, and I have to patiently wait and wait and wait. But again, I could get 80 different photos out of just the cloud shifting. So this is not what I expected to get, but this is what I got from finding an opportunity, kind of. It's like a diamond in the rough, right? Yeah. Or like this one. This is probably one of my favorite black and whites that I've done. Cloudy day, rainy, crappy, shitty. I walked a quarter of a mile or so in the rain on the closed road to this trail. And the sign on the trail said, this was one of the trails I really wanted to go on. And it was closed due to flooding. Well, shit. Crappy situation. Now I'm in two crappy situations, right? The trail's closed where I wanted to go because of flooding over the stream where I had to cross several times. And then at the same time, it was raining. So situation number one, I pushed myself through and said, keep on going. Situation number two, I could have turned around and walked back in the rain and just been done. And I thought, you know what? I'm here, right? Let's just wander. So I went down. I'm like, hey, it's not so bad. And the trees, right? It's just drips of rain every once in a while. It's not like that constant, like very continuous rainfall. But guess what? It was rainy. Everybody was staying away. Nobody wanted to be wet and cold. So I wandered around, and this is a very popular place at a glacier. And it could be that I could have missed this photo because there would have been 1,000 people on the trail, and I never could have got things figured out and had to wait forever and just given up, right? So again, two shitty situations gave me something I'm pretty happy with. But you have to see it differently. And then again, I didn't have to deal with any harsh light and so on and so forth. So because it was cloudy. Again, this is when I set no expectation. So this was an area, if I would have set the expectations looking at where we were going, I could have looked at the lake on the left side and then looked at the mountains on the left side and kind of where we were at. And it just didn't seem like a great photographic opportunity. And then with all national parks, when 1 million vehicles are stopped, that means something pretty good's happening. So I get out and I ask what's going on. Oh, there's a grizzly bear. I've always wanted to see grizzly bear in the wild. And I figured if I was ever going to see it, it's probably going to be in Alaska, and it never happened. So I had set my expectations that in life it will never happen. I will never see one close enough to shoot it with the 70-200 2.8 because I need a 600 millimeter. Guess what? I just didn't set those expectations that would happen, and guess what? Here it is. So it happened, right? I was happy. I got something I wasn't expecting. And when you don't set the expectation and something fun or magical happens, it's kind of like that, ooh, this is awesome. This just happened. Luck happened. It gives you that little bit of boost, and then you get more creative and motivated. Like, what else is here? There's things happening all the time that I'm missing out on. I have to look for them, right? So sometimes they'll present themselves, and sometimes you have to find them. Or like this one. This is one of my favorites. I had set the expectations that this part of Lake McDonald would be so busy by the time we got there that I couldn't get any good photos, and there's 1 million people. And I tried to take this photo the day before, and there's 1 million people, and all the freaking people's evil children were like, the sign says, do not go on the dock, and their kids are on the dock, and I'm like, right? But I thought I would never get a photo that I really wanted to, that I saw, because we wouldn't be at anywhere close to the times that I'd want to go. And come to find out that the hotel a couple months before we checked in was closed, and they didn't tell us, but they booked us anyway, which then led to my mom calling the little motel with like 10 rooms, like 200 feet or not much farther from the motel is Lake McDonald. It's in the park. That is booked up a year in advance, easy. So we called and said, it happened to be a room open. They're like, we sure? We just had one canceled. So it was the easiest place to photograph, because I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning, got my coffee, sat down by Lake McDonald and waited for the light or did whatever I wanted to do. And there was no one there. No one. So I got the photos I wanted. Now, was there a couple other photographers? Sure, but nothing crazy. So this one I really liked. It was something, this could it have been done when it was busy? Yes, but it would have taken a lot more work and stuff that you don't want to deal with. But sometimes when you don't have that expectation, or you set the expectation that's not going to happen, it won't, because you've already convinced yourself it's not going to happen, so you don't put in the effort to go do it. But then the great thing too is if you go out at those times when majority of people don't get up, right? The regular tourists, because they don't get up in the morning. Vacations for sleeping in till noon and then do something for 2 hours and then go back to the motel. That's not my gig. So, again, something you can find photographically can be there as well. Or like this one. Were there things I change about this? Yes. I wish I would have used a polarizer and maybe some other stuff, but it's still one of my favorite photos from the trip. Same day. Towards the evening, if I remember right, I went one time, and this giant like roots was not where I wanted it to be. I could have said it's not going to be there, so I'm not going to come back. But I was not that far from this location was walking distance from our motel. We were there, so why not? So when the light looked good, I'd walk back. It wasn't the position, right? All the stars kind of aligned. I got it. It was closer to the shore and things like that. So there's lots of things that I could have set the expectation that it's bad, it's not where I want it to be. But guess what? Water moves and things in water float around. So you just got to keep checking back. And I had that ability to do that. So therefore I did. Like this one. I had set the expectation in my head that the photo I wanted had the whatever you want to call it, the bird, we'll call it a bird, perched on the peak. And I got 2 photos that I didn't really like compositionally. And then the dumb thing decided to fly off, and someone's like, just click the button. What do you have to lose, right? And as I was going back, I was like, I'll look at it. I'm like, I kind of like that. It's more interesting. So again, sometimes the expectation you're set is not the expectation that maybe you want in the end. You're expecting the composition to be with the turkey vulture, that's what it was, perched on the peak of the roof, right? And he was looking off to the right. And then he sat there forever. I got a couple of photos, but then he got up and flew away. Guess what? It worked for me. But then I came back home, and it was dreary that day. And I just was told, this is the trip my mom went on with me in May. And I was like, let's just drive home. The weather sucks. Why waste our time? And I'm like, I drove all the way to South Dakota, North Dakota. Why not just go to the last couple places I planned? And if I wouldn't have and used the crappy situation again to my advantage, I may not have got this. It took a lot more editing, and it's heavily edited, and that's fine. That's the look I wanted. But it took a lot more work later because the expectation I had in my head for this image was not really probably what I truly wanted in the end. But it took time. Or like this one. I love this one of the bus. The only expectation I took with this photo was I wanted to take a photo of it. And the other expectation was I didn't want time to be a limit. So I was going to be there as long as I wanted to be till I got a photo I wanted. And I did that. I met my expectations. I got what I wanted. Exposure-wise and all that good stuff, and I was super excited. So then that gave me more motivation and more excitement, more creativity for the rest of the trip. And when I start, it's like, if you think about it, though, in the film days, you would take it and you wouldn't see a photo, right? And you'd come back, and then there was the excitement was built up, and you'd get your film, and you're like, nothing. But now we can see it digitally, but when you take that picture, there's still that delay. We don't see it right away, and it's like Christmas. You hit the button, you're like, woo, or no, right? So it's stuff like that where I set the expectation of, I know I want to stop at a location. I know where it is. I've seen this before. I didn't get time to stop the last time. This is pretty much the only reason I drove on that boring road across Nebraska. But I knew there was a lot of photographic opportunities for what I wanted to photograph. So on my trip to South Dakota, the only expectation I set was I was going to all these towns that were abandoned or kind of like ghost towns. That's all. I didn't look at specific photos. I would look at a photo on Instagram and say, that looks pretty interesting location, but I didn't look at it on Instagram that I had to find that exact location. Now, there are some places I would have liked to, but again, I set my own thing up and I made my own images. Or like this one. I was not expecting this photograph. It's probably one of my most favorites from Great Sand Dunes. I went that morning or that afternoon with the expectations, knowing that the light was shitty, but I was expecting that I was going to get great photographs. Everything was going to be beautiful and great because I'm going there, right? And I set that expectation. And then I got there and I was really let down. And there's 1 million people there. And I had set the expectation in my head knowing it was Memorial Day. There's be 1 million people. It's not the first time I've been at a national park during Memorial Day. I know what's going to happen, but I set the expectation that people aren't going to be here. And then I get there and guess what? I didn't meet my expectations, so I was bummed out. But I was like, my mom's like, do you guys want to go back at night? Yes. Like, can we go back? Yeah, let's go back in the evening. And guess what? The only thing I set my expectation was that I was going to go to the park and see what was going to happen. And this presented itself. So again, theme, I didn't set hardly any hard, distinct lines in the sand of expectations, and I'm more happy. Or like this photo, if I'm thinking it's the next one. Yes. So I was like expecting that the sunrise would come up at this time. There's probably no clouds. There were supposed to be no clouds in the weather. So I got up really early. First thing I did was get ready, looked out the window, noticed there was clouds. So I was like, oh no, it's not what I wanted. But this actually, and I knew that the sun was going to take, if sunrise was at say 5:40 in the morning or whatever, it was like 6 a.m. or something, that the sun was still going to be behind the mountains. So I had some leeway to get out there, and I waited and waited. But these clouds actually made the photo for me at the location. I think if it would have been just, I had set the expectation that I was going to have nice golden light across the valley there and then up the sand dunes. And that didn't happen. But I got something that I wasn't expecting. Same with this one. Same crappy morning. That wouldn't have been as, I think, a great of a photo because I wouldn't have got the sun rays coming through the clouds and the mistiness out from the sun coming behind the mountains on the sunrise because of those clouds. This was on the way to the park. This wasn't even in the park yet. So it was one of those things too. It's like, again, I set expectations that something was going to happen and it didn't. And then you can get all bummed out about it, or you can just move on and pivot. Yeah, I think I got to go. Oh, like this one. So this is one I did a week ago, whenever. It was harsh light. It was shitty light. It was very crappy out. So what do? I pivoted. I try to create images in harsh light, one that trains me to work in those type of situations, and it also makes me think differently for those types of situations. So if I ever have to be there, I can still create an image. Did I have to bring the magic of editing in? Yes, I did. But I still got a photo that I wanted in the end. And it's not what I was expecting because, again, I set no expectations of this photo other than composition when I shot it. And as we wrap up here, all my farmer photos that I do, I don't set the expectation other than I'm going to a farm. I don't know the location. I don't go out there beforehand. It's all a crapshoot. So if I set the expectations that every farm photo is going to look like this one, it's not going to work. But if I work with what I got and what's presented to me, then I'm a lot happier. I'm thinking, okay, with what was presented to me, did I make what I want? Yes. Then trying to compare everything to this. I'm never going to get this golden light. I never would have got the golden light in them if he wouldn't have said, do you want to go to the pasture? And he had a story behind it. And I could have been honest and like, Ronnie, no, I don't want to go. I'm kind of tired, but whatever, sure, let's go. And guess what? I'm like, whoo, look at this. And then we created some photos. Come on, there we are. Or like White Sands. When I was at White Sands, I didn't expect these type of photos. I didn't. I was expecting to shoot everything abstractly. Waves of sand and sand dunes and all this. I didn't expect to think of dead trees sticking out of the sand and things like that, right? But I just set my expectations that I'm flying to El Paso and driving to White Sands. That's the only expectation I had. I thought I'd do some things, but then I got there and I had to pivot. I was looking for those trees I always see too. I never found one of them. Or like this one. This is God, I can't think of the little town. It was a historic town I found on the way back to El Paso, going the opposite way because I didn't want to go back the same way to the airport and the hotel that night. And if I would have set the expectations of what this town would look like based off of how I got there through the city, I never would have thought this place was really cool. It was like it's a historic town within pretty much a town, and it was super cool. I never would have thought this, but finding color and stuff like that and just working through it, it was one of those things. But if you would have set the expectations just driving down the main street or the areas through these literally retirement communities to get there, and old people in 80s plus driving around in golf carts, I'm not lying, I would have turned the vehicle around and left. But I went there and then I found some really cool stuff. So that is all I kind of have. I'm going to kind of go through that. And and Masia, yes, you're right. See, thank you, Corey Masia. Kind of just you can set expectations, that's okay, but don't get all wrapped up that when you set the expectation, that's the way it's going to be. Because if it's not and you have to pivot, then we've already talked about the things that can happen. So what's coming up? So next week, or not next week, the following week. So next, come on, computer. So not next week, but the following week, I'll do photographing the Iowa State Fair. So kind of why I do it, why I like to do it, and some photos from the years past, things like that. It's like a street photographer's paradise, really. People are so in tune to doing what they're doing. I don't think most people would realize their photos being taken, but we can talk about that then. But next week, I'm going to talk about carrying your gear. So camera bag essentials. It seems like kind of a no-brainer kind of thing, but there's so many camera bags these days, and there's so much different stuff. I love bags, and like right now, I'm sitting on 3 different bags over here in a hard case of camera gear, and why I have certain bags for certain situations. So we'll talk about things like that and some of my favorite brands. And then in October, I think it'll be October at that point. If you're into black and white, I didn't make it yet, but Chuck Kimmerly is going to be on the show. We're going to talk about black and white photography. I love Chuck's work. And if you're with Lynn Area Photo Club and went several years ago when Chuck was here for us, that was great. But I'm just going to talk about, before Chuck gets on the show in October, looking at subjects in a new light. How do we go to the same location? How do we photograph the same things we do over and over and over and over and over and come up with something different every time? Or take a photo, post-process maybe, and tweak it differently than what we normally would. And that's just looking at things differently. And the last one, as always, thank you guys for showing up. We had, I think, between 10 and 13 kind of like pop in and out here. So again, if you want to support the show, don't feel necessary, but you can do it with the QR code thingy up top. That's what I'm going to say about that. But again, as always, thank you guys. If you have ideas, things like that. I know, Paul, if you're still here, you talked about maybe some stuff where we could, oh yes, Pamela, Coffee and Clicks is this Saturday. Yes, yep. So we are going to do Coffee and Clicks this Saturday. So that's going to be over on Edgewood. And bring your photo questions. Let's talk. Hope to see everybody there. You are welcome as always, Mary. So like I said, Coffee and Clicks is this weekend, 9 to 11 at Scooters in the little conference meeting room over on Edgewood. You are welcome, Don. But again, yeah, like I said, as always, very grateful for you guys to show up. Feel free to share all this. If you have other photographer friends, share it along. All of it's on YouTube, so you can see it all on YouTube later. Share my YouTube page if you want. I don't know. Facebook's, I think, kind of dinging me lately on things, so people aren't seeing stuff. So share away, please. That would be awesome. Thank you, Corey. You are welcome as always. Thank you for being a longtime supporter, along with all of the rest of you. So hope to see you all at Coffee and Clicks if you can make it. If not, it's every month. So we will go there. And I'm going to sign off for tonight. So any questions, you know where to find me. Reach out and I will get them answered. So you guys have a wonderful night and see you all next week or at Coffee.